Hello and welcome to the Box Score Network YouTube channel. I am Simon Short. Joining me tonight is Ben Parker. Ben, how you doing?
Doing great, man, and excited, man. We got stuff to talk about.
We sure do. Nothing like a good old end of June. NBA free agency is just about to kick off, so let's have a big blockbuster NFL trade. We're here to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and Miami Dolphins executing a trade centered around defensive backs Minkah Fitzpatrick and Jalen Ramsey. The exact particulars of the trade are Pittsburgh is sending Minkah Fitzpatrick and a 2027 fifth round pick to Miami in exchange for Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith, and a 2027 seventh round pick, sort of swapping day three picks there. Miami getting the better of the two. Um, Ben, what were your initial reactions just first off rip when the Schefter bomb came down today on the Twitterverse?
Yeah, my first reaction was probably what everybody's reaction was: is hey, that's a little weird, right? Safety on safety. That was probably my first one. After that, though, I was reminded that it's really hard to pull off a perfect trade in the NFL, man. It
Yeah.
just is. You think, well, 32 teams, you should be able to find a good trade partner that's got what you need. That it just doesn't happen that often, man. You kind of have to bit and piece, and you're like, well, they don't have exactly what we need, but they got something we can use. And so that is the second thing that struck me here.
Yeah, and it's the rare player for player trade, right? Where we'll
Yeah,
get into it when we talk about both sides individually, but both these teams were shopping this offseason whether to unload some players or bring on some players. So these two teams crossed paths multiple times throughout the offseason and then just kind of settled on what this trade package officially was. Because normally it is just we either need this guy or need to get rid of this guy. What's the draft pick compensation for that, and who wants
yeah.
them or who has them? It's a supply and demand, and then just what do I have to pay to get them? Rarely is it the I need this thing and I have this thing and let's make this work. Let's break this down from the two sides. I drew the straw to get to talk first, and obviously I've got the Steelers stuff behind me, so I'm just going to start with the Steelers stuff and get your reaction. So, Ben, I lived through this live while it was happening. So first I get the notification that the Steelers trade for Jalen Ramsey, and I'm pumped, man. I'm in the Slack talking mess. We've got some Browns fans on Box Score Network. I'm ready to go. I'm like, this team's been wondering who the nickel is. It's Jalen freaking Ramsey, Jalen Ramsey and Slay and Joey Porter Jr., Minkah and Deshaun Elliott got his extension behind him. And then it's a long time before the draft pick compensation comes through, Ben. I'm like, oh, I'm tweeting like I'm a big shot. I'm like, they're just figuring out how much money each team is going to pay in 2025, and that's the sliding scale of the draft pick. I think I'm so smart, right? And then it was like I forget the wording, but it was just like the rare player for player trade, and I was like, crap, who is it? And it's Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Huh.
And then ultimately, this came down to I think my true like coming out of all of this in a vacuum is just it's a little rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, right? When you're taking one guy out of the defense backfield and you're adding another, it's like, okay, yeah, like that's cool, and we can get into some stuff and like what it can mean. And Ramsey's a little more versatile than Minka at this point, but I don't really know what it's ultimately going to turn into. So I'm just going to take you through like what I kind of thought as I was going through this in my head chronologically and tell you where I ended up on why I thought this happened. So why did the Steelers trade Minkah Fitzpatrick? There's been a decline in play over 2 years, based on
Yeah.
first schematics, what's been happening. 2 years ago, in 2023, Minka's at the line of scrimmage a lot more. He even played some slot in the first week of the season. He's like leading the NFL in tackles, just not doing what Minka was doing when he was winning All Pros. Three-time All Pro, had 6 interceptions the year before, led the league, was an All Pro in 2022. And those splash plays, that hasn't happened because he was counted on to be literally a free safety way in the back as a center fielder or up close to the line of scrimmage making a bunch of tackles. Last year in 2024, there's all the miscommunications. There's weird stuff with the defense, and it's a little bit of who was the issue behind that. A lot of people thought it was Cortland Sutton kind of coming back after his time away from the Steelers and then his legal issues and then coming off of a suspension. A lot of it was what is it, Minkah Fitzpatrick kind of 90% of the time trying to just be that safety net and not be aggressive, and then 10% of the time being over aggressive in situations. There was a lot of miscommunications with that Steelers backfield last year. So there was a decline in play from Minkah, at least on statistically speaking, in the last 2 years. And then you roll that into he was going to be extension eligible next year. So the next offseason was going to go into the last year of his contract. He would be 30 years old. I ultimately think the Steelers had decided at this point Minkah Fitzpatrick was not getting another contract with the Steelers. So then why did they target Jalen Ramsey? My best guess, what it all boiled down to, higher ceiling play in 2025 at free safety. And only 2025. Now Ramsey has a contract through 2028. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Um, Contract details haven't come through. The Steelers rarely trade for a player with a contract and keep the contract as is. So there's a lot of option bonuses and things for on Ramsey's contract. I don't think all of that is really in the math for them. I think they're just thinking about 2025 and whether you could we'll go through all the machinations of where Ramsey could play and how he fits with the rest of the guys. I think ultimately what's going to happen is Jalen Ramsey is going to play free safety in Minkah Fitzpatrick's place, and the Pittsburgh Steelers think that gives them a non-0% chance increase in winning a Super Bowl. I think if the math is, hey, Minka's an 85, but Jalen's a 90, that's why they made the trade. Even if they're trying to project Minkah Fitz or Jalen Ramsey playing transitioning to safety for the first time in his career. And he said he's gonna do that at some point, right? All these corners say that. The Steelers almost tried to do that with Patrick Peterson a couple years ago. They just maybe got on a little too late. Maybe this is their chance to get ahead of it early and get Ramsey in this last 5 years, 4 years, 3 years of his career, whatever it is, as a safety. But I think this move ultimately comes down to Ramsey playing free safety and being a little bit better than Minkah Fitzpatrick in 2025. What are your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, see, I on the Steelers side, I love everything you're putting down there. It did feel like, first of all, a short term move. And you know me, I'm not a short term guy. I
Mm.
am a long term guy. I'm not the hugest fan of that, but I get it. You know, you brought Aaron Rodgers in the building. You know, why waste the season? And it kind of goes along with Steelers roster building in that they don't like to suck at different positions. They want to fill up the weakest spots, you know. So I get it, even though I do love the long term building better. But that's just where the Steelers are right now. So I'll put my bias there aside. And listen, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you add in Jonnu Smith, they might even have. I joked on our draft show a few weeks ago about the Cowboys or the Patriots putting together a three tight end roster. And the Steelers could actually do that at times this year if they want
Hmm.
to, just to get bodies on the
Oh, and
field,
they
right?
will.
Because you have
They will.
Washington as the huge target, who's the blocking type of guy.
Yep.
They'll have Fryermuth as more of the traditional tight end, and then Jonnu Smith, who's more like the slot tight end, who's kind of the flex versatile guy, right? So,
Hmm.
you know, you kept coming back to the idea that the Steelers just didn't have enough guys to throw to on the Jonnu Smith side of things, and this
Yep.
isn't even touching the Ramsey side. And you also kind of kept coming back to the idea that, hey, the Steelers secondary has some stuff to work with, but it still feels short for what they're hoping to do with Aaron Rodgers in one season.
Yep.
So I get it. I definitely get what Pittsburgh's trying to do here, and I am okay with it, especially because I trust Tomlin.
And I think, and I'll stay on Ramsey for a second, then I'll go to the offensive side. To your point, like one piece short, right? I'm sure they went into this thinking they wanted Ramsey and Fitzpatrick
Right.
because, like I said, Slay and Joey Porter on the outside. Ramsey at this point in his career is best as a slot. So you do that, and then he's kind of like a hyper backup at all the other spots, and then you got Elliott and Minkah. Now what you're looking at, like I said, I think it's just going to be Ramsey taking Minka's place. You've got Slay and Joey Porter Jr. on the outside, and
Yeah.
then Beanie Bishop, the undrafted rookie from last year, is going to be the slot this year. You could fiddle around with that a little bit. You could
Mm-hmm.
go, there's still some free agent safeties. You could go get a Justin Simmons, Julian Blackman from the Colts is the other guy that's kind of been linked. Quandre Diggs. Like there are these veteran free safeties that you could just say, just go be the center fielder and we'll just have three crazy corners and we will put Ramsey in the nickel. You could do that. Darius Slay, the other free agent corner, he's 35. Maybe he wants to go play some safety. You could do that and put Ramsey on the outside. I think that's
Right.
actually the worst of the options. What I do ultimately think this is, I think it's just going to be Ramsey taking Minka's place, but I'm sure they'll look around and try to bring in one extra free agent. Um, but we also said that with wide receiver to go over to the offensive side when they bring in DK and you think they got DK and George Pickens and then they unload Pickens. We were like, okay, well, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, some whoever it is. Terry McLaurin when there was the one week that we thought Terry McLaurin was getting traded. And they just didn't. They're like, ah, Roman Wilson, Kevin Austin the third will be fine. But Jonnu Smith, that'll do it. Um, and to your point on the offense, and I'm going to use this into the how they got to these two players again. Back to the idea from the beginning, they wanted Jonnu Smith. Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator. He wants Jonnu. He's had Jonnu everywhere he's
Yeah,
been. Um, they made calls about Ramsey. They made calls about Jonnu Smith. Miami probably floated that, we like Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Steelers probably at some point were like, yeah, we don't think so. And then when they've probably struck out on certain wide receivers or certain other offensive playmakers or maybe some other corners that they thought that they would get in free agency and it just hasn't worked out. They're like, we really do want Ramsey and Jonnu. Let's go ahead and make this move for Minkah for everything I said at the beginning. And that's what leads to the rare player for player trade. But yeah, there'll be 13 personnel. There's going to be Jonnu at H back a lot. There's going to be Freiermuth in the slot. They're going to move those guys around, do different stuff. But you're going to see those three tight ends on the field a good chunk of time with DK Metcalf. Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin still probably out there trying to do something work, and then Jalen Warren and Caleb Johnson out of Iowa being the back. So I think this is just all in for 2025 for the Steelers. Because again, same thing like DK, just like a little bit better than Pickens, right? Whatever you want to say it is. They're just trying to get every extra percentage point that they can, leaning towards trying to win a Super Bowl. Let's flip this over to Miami here. Ben, I mean, I had a couple notes on the Dolphins. It's a little bit rearranging deck chairs for them too. Like their defensive backfield was kind of a mess anyways. But at the end of the day, I just think this makes them tougher, right? They know their mentality. They know that, or perceived mentality. They know what everybody thinks of them. Hey, we're soft. We get to the winner. We just can't get it done. All our star players are all flash, right? And like Ramsey's a tough SOB. Like, don't get me wrong, but like LA, Super Bowls, Miami, yada yada. Minka's just a dog, right? And like they just need someone that's just gonna be tough and like hold people accountable and be good in the locker room and all. And I think this just came down to we have our superstars that want to leave. We've overpaid. Let's try to get out of the money a little bit. And let's see if we can get like a culture resetting guy in. And we really like Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's the only note I could give on the Dolphins. So what did you think about this from Miami's point of view?
I got so many things on the Dolphins, but let me just hit a couple here first and interact a little bit. The key point for me here was that I really truly felt like months ago Jalen Ramsey was already gone. I thought that was key.
Hmm.
It really did feel like, and listen, you and I have talked about other players in the past where you're like, yeah, they're disagreeing with the organization, but it does not feel like it's over. It really felt to me like
Yeah.
Ramsey's gone. And
Hmm.
I just really believed that. So the key point there became, well, can you get something for him, or does he just walk out the door on you? I mean, you just cut him, and that for me was a big thing. So with that in mind, the idea that Ramsey was already gone, that they already had to do something, he just wasn't happy there. They weren't happy with him. So now you bring in Fitzpatrick, who would again, you mentioned it. Ramsey has the higher ceiling, I think, still. Probably always has had the higher ceiling and still has it even for the next couple of seasons. Both players have declined over the past couple of years. They are not what they were 2, 3 years ago. That's fine. But still, Ramsey looks like he's got the higher ceiling and offers more flexibility over there for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But now you bring in Minkah. Listen, not much has changed here for Miami overall. You mentioned rearranging deck chairs. They have so many holes on this roster. Goodness gracious. Offensive line is going to be a big struggle. You and I will cover that in a couple of days.
Yeah, we
All
will.
right. But the secondary is worse. And it really didn't get any better. Basically, what they've done here with Minkah, he's going to kind of play middle linebacker from the safety spot. All right. You look at that secondary, that has got to be the worst secondary in football. It is dreadful. It's not that they have nobody, but they have precious little back there to work with. They opted for some other things in the draft, and I clapped and cheered for it because they needed to address other issues. They just had too many holes. They do, and they still have too many holes. So I don't know that anything significantly changes here, but at least you have Minkah, who can roam the free safety spot and who can get aggressive and play cleanup, down there in the box, right? So Anthony Weaver's going to love having him there. He's really going to enjoy that. Those are the first two things I thought with this Miami trade. You were already losing Ramsey, and you just got too many holes. So at least Minkah could kind of center field and be aggressive there.
Anthony Weaver comes from Baltimore, right? So he played a lot of
Yeah.
Minkah Fitzpatrick and probably used him as teach tape a time or two.
Hmm.
Minkah definitely loved being that pseudo middle linebacker for Miami, right? The first time around, that worked out great for him.
No, not so
Um,
much.
Also, in terms of the where the standing is for Miami and their corners, Storm Duck, Cater Kohu, and Artie Burns are listed as their starting corners on Our Lads. Minka is going to remember Artie Burns because Artie Burns was the first round flame out by the time Minka got to Pittsburgh, who was already just a full-time special teamer in 2019 before his rookie contract was even up. So if he's actually slated to be a starter at some point, there's no way that's going to happen. Um, but Minka's going to be like, really, this guy? Like he was done when 5 years ago. How is he here? Um, yeah, there's connections, and I get it, but I feel so bad for Minka, man. He's gonna be miserable.
Well, yeah, and I'll hit my last two notes here. That's one reason I didn't want Miami to draft anybody in the secondary. There were too many holes. It's going to be lonely and isolated
Hmm.
playing by yourself. Ramsey was going to feel that way, and Minka's going to feel that way. They got Ashton Davis in as well, so it's not like they are bereft of anybody in the secondary, but it is a long haul between them and a decent secondary. I mean, just forget about it. They are probably, I don't mean to be all doom and gloom here on Miami, but they are probably going to have the worst pass defense in football or one of the worst because you look at the linebackers as well and the defensive line, they can get some pressure on the quarterback. There's no question about it. They should hold up decent against the run, but the linebackers just are not going to be much help in pass coverage either. So that back six, that back seven, if you will, it's going to be a long season. If Miami wins games, they're going to be in shootout after shootout after shootout after shootout. That's just the way it's going to be. And one last note here on Miami. I know Javon Holland did not play great last year, just didn't really seem to jive exactly. And, that'll happen at the safety spot. But boy, he's 4 years younger than anybody in this trade. You know, he's younger than the guy you let go, he's younger than the guy you brought in. They didn't pay him a whole heck of a lot of money, about just maybe a shade more than what Minkah's making right now. And I know there was a money swap here, but why not pay Javon Holland, trade Minkah, get some draft picks, or get another corner or get a linebacker, something. I wasn't a huge fan of that either, since you let go of, I think, 25-year-old Javon Holland, who made about the same money as Minkah. Wasn't a huge fan of that either, but it is what it is for the Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean they wow, yeah, their salaries are essentially the same over the life of the remainder of their deals. I wonder if Holland just straight up didn't want to come back, but
That's
um
also possible.
I think it might have been. But yeah, that idea of just of constantly you already had holes to fill and you're just filling in the new holes that prop up in the boat, right? You got a boat and your engine's been failing for years, but you're just like, I'll just duct tape things together, right? Oh, a new hole popped out. I'll just figure that part out. We'll worry about the engine later. You can't. Um, yeah,
Just to
not getting out ahead of the of a lot of these issues is Miami for sure.
No, and bless their heart. Sometimes they can't get out of their own way. They got a chance to win some games this year, but boy, that offense is going to have to be fire this year. I don't know that they'll miss Jonnu Smith a lot. He was a part of what they were doing last
Right.
year. But again, when you've got the offensive creativity, as long as Tua's healthy, you got the two fantastic wideouts, you got running backs. I don't know that that's going to hurt them necessarily as much as it might help Pittsburgh over the course of this season. And listen, just in case anybody's confused about what's happening here for Miami, they let go of the guy who didn't want to be here, Jalen Ramsey, brought back the guy that they kicked out 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and
Because
all
he didn't want to be
because,
there.
yes, because he didn't want to be there, and all because they didn't want to pay Javon Holland, who also may not have wanted to come back and play for them.
Raheem Mostert tweeted today, "This is what happens when you play well in Miami. You don't want to stay there." Um, I know what your answer is going to be on this, but just for the listeners, because this is a trade reaction pod video, Ben, who would you say won this trade?
Boy, it was tight. Ultimately, I will say Pittsburgh because at least it looks like they have a plan here. It's a 1 year plan, but at least they got a plan here.
If you got to pick one, yeah, it's Jalen Ramsey going into that group that's already there versus Minka going into the group that he's in.
Right.
What out now more a more apt question at the end of 2025. Will either of these moves have made a difference in either of these team seasons?
To me, in Miami, I don't see how it could. And in Pittsburgh, the answer is possibly. Listen, if it gets you back in the playoffs and gets you one playoff win, then it was worth it to me.
Yep, that's all they're going for right now, man. They just got to get that
Yep.
monkey off their back. All right, Ben, this was great. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like this video. We've got stuff going up on the feed once or twice a week from all of our Box Score Network podcasts. So check that out. Check out all the network pods um, on audio format as well, the full length podcast audios. But we'll be here throughout the summer, throughout the season, with some of these reaction videos as they come. So thank you all so much for watching. We will talk to you soon. Have a good one.